Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Kelly Lantana. I am the field specialist for the Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's great to see everyone. And we'll see if we can get this going with share screen there. I'm going to share and then I'm going to expand. And so hopefully you are now seeing a picture from my windshield looking out east. And so that's actually not the sunset. The sunset is behind me, but we were getting some coming forward. You know, the light was just bouncing forward. And it was just an amazing monsoon. What did you all think of that?
Nice.
It definitely was.
Excellent.
You know, I was reading some of the Twitter reports, and people were talking about, you know, their feelings about the monsoon, and it was just so amazing that everyone's kind of afraid that it's never going to happen again in their lifetimes. So we'll see what we can get. We'll see what we can get. All right. So let me kind of back up a little bit. And back when we were talking about the monsoon starting up, so this, you know, we start thinking about these things in April and May. And then here comes June, and April and May were just really, really dry. I mean, we had the driest 2 months on record in Arizona for April and May. So that was something else. And we started to see these outlooks. And that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at some of the seasonal outlooks and the monthly outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center. And so the one on the bottom, on the right-hand side where it says seasonal precipitation outlook, it says it's valid for June, July, and August. And it was issued in May, like mid-May. And I started getting questions about that. And I was hesitant, can we say the very least. I don't think I've ever really seen where we're expecting to have already above average precipitation for the monsoon. So I was hesitant. Then we started, you know, seeing other types of outlooks, and they kept having that green area in Arizona and New Mexico. And so, you know, the confidence started to build. We started to get precipitation in July. New Mexico started to get precipitation before Arizona. And it started putting out all the wildfires in New Mexico. So I was grateful to see that. I still didn't believe it, but it was still saying that we were going to have an above average monsoon season. So this one in the lower right-hand side, right in through there, it was issued the first part of June. And it was pretty excited for a wet monsoon season. And then by the time August hit, I believed it. I was like, it did happen. It verified. And so that was something exceptional. And of course, you could see that the monthly precipitation for August was just off the roof. They really expected that to happen. Now, the ingredients for putting out a forecast like that, an outlook, is that the Great Plains area was warm and it was dry. And so the expectation was that there was going to be the monsoon ridge building and building strongly in our Four Corners region. And that's what we saw happening. That's really what it was. We know that our trends in the West are to be hotter and drier. But these trends for precipitation really are only looking at changes within our last climate normals. So a climate normal is looking at a 30-year average. So we look at, you know, we add up all the numbers that are happening on that specific date or that season, and we divide by 30, and it gives us what we think is the climate norm. And so when you're looking here at the annual precipitation change in the Western trends that we're moving to be drier, that's showing us that long-term drought that we've been experiencing. You may recall in the 70s and 80s, we were fairly wet. In the 90s, Arizona started to not get as much. And so we peg the start of our drought in Arizona kind of in the mid 90s. And so that's really what we're seeing here when we're looking at these Western trends hotter. We're definitely seeing the increase in temperature, but the drier part is really honing in on that lack of precipitation in these last few decades. So when we're looking at kind of the June through August precipitation for this summer, it was amazing. And so really looking at the signature of that monsoon was really seen in the Four Corners states. And that's where we want it to be seen. I mean, so it panned out. And this was, we're looking at some of the wettest monsoon numbers from June, July, August on record. So this is in the top 10 area. The way that we can look at different data points is we can kind of bring together the Western states. Those would be California and Nevada. The Four Corners, we would call that the Southwest climate region. That's us. So that's Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. So it looked very, very good. When we're looking at kind of the trends for the Southwest, so now let's go to those four states, our Four Corners states. We are seeing an increase in our temperatures. So the annual average temperature, that's an interesting thing. It is one number that represents, so we're looking at all of the Four Corners states, it's one number that represents that year for all of those states. So we add everything together, we crunch it all together, and we come up with one number that represents that average temperature. So it's not the maximum, it's not the minimum, it's the average. And it's over that entire year. And you can still see that for the Four Corners states, we're seeing an increase in temperature, particularly in the last 30 years, we're seeing that increase. And that increase in temperature ranges from about 0.5 degree Fahrenheit per decade to about 7 degrees Fahrenheit per decade. It depends on where it's landing. Now, when you're looking at the average annual precipitation, so that's in the green, that's what you're looking at there. And that's it's a weird number to consider, but climatologically, that's how we think about things, trying to see if there are trends. And when we're looking at the average annual precipitation, this is one number that represents those four states. How much are we getting in precipitation annually? So throughout the whole year, what's that number? And you can see that there's no trend for our precipitation. And that seems to bear out when we're looking at all of the climate models, when we're looking at our climate results, we're seeing that we're still highly variable. That's the nature of our climate, to have some dry years and some wet years. So we're not seeing any trend in more or less precipitation. It's still highly, highly variable, which is what we would expect. And so for the monsoon, really what panned out, and this is kind of looking at the Southwest, and you can see where we had a lot of areas that were above precipitation. I mean, Nevada and Southern California actually tapping into some of that monsoon moisture is really an unusual experience for them. You may remember Death Valley flooded during our monsoon. So there was a lot of precipitation all over. And what you're looking at here, this map is giving us the percentage above the precipitation, the average precipitation. So we don't want to see the actual amounts of precipitation, because that's not as meaningful as if we wanted to compare it to, are we above average or are we below average? And so we're looking at locations in that are, above average in the blue, well above average in the purple. So doing really well throughout the monsoon. And that kind of, if we just zoom in and see what happened with June and July and August, we can see that in June, there was really a lot of activity below the international border. So we saw a lot of activity happening in Mexico, and then we saw it coming into New Mexico, and New Mexico was hit first, which is just amazing to see. I was really grateful to see that. And then it started coming into Arizona. Now we're looking at those same kinds of maps where the colors are showing us, oh, hey, this is above average. And so we're seeing a lot of the purples and the blues, which means above average. But if you're looking over kind of in Arizona, June is the driest month for Arizona. So for example, Phoenix, the average amount of precipitation for Phoenix in June for the entire month is 0.02 of an inch. So Phoenix actually ended up getting 1/3 of an inch. So you can see that that means, that was exceptional. It was well above average. So it's sometimes important to kind of read how much water actually came in versus the, above average precipitation. So June was a good start. I was still holding my breath. And it wasn't really until July started coming through that everything kind of looked like those standard flows. With July, in our monsoon season, you get those spotty types of thunderstorms. They're called convective thunderstorms. And so you get that really heavy, intense precipitation. In Arizona, we talk about, you're getting rain and your neighbor down the street is completely dry. That's the nature of the type of thunderstorms that we get in the monsoon season. And so it's very spotty. It doesn't spread over every location. And so that's what you're seeing when you're looking at July and you're looking at that spotty type of precipitation. But you can see the Four Corners region is above average. We started seeing a lot of precipitation coming into Apache County, along the Four Corners region. You're seeing it go up into southern Colorado. It was great to see. And then by August, that pattern of spottiness started to really confirm itself with a lot of atmospheric moisture coming in. And so we started getting a lot of moisture coming in. We were setting records for our precipitable water. Precipitable water is something that we measure with the weather balloons. And when we're launching weather balloons, it's measuring moisture in the atmosphere all the way up. And so we come up with this number, which tells us, okay, there's about 2 inches of water, and we call it precipitable water, 2 inches of water in the atmosphere. That means, it gives us an idea of if all of the water were to come out of the sky, how much rain would we get? So we started seeing record amounts of precipitable water. So the atmosphere was really moist. It was really surged to bring in a lot of precipitation. And we saw that continue in August. And September continued as well. When we're looking at the averages for June, July, and August, you can extrapolate and look at the individual states. Utah, still didn't get as much as it probably wanted to, and Colorado not as much, but we're looking at the entire state. So that's another thing to remember. For Utah and Colorado, it doesn't always get to the higher northern portions of those states. But for Arizona and New Mexico, we can get pretty well covered. And that's where we saw, looking at June, July, August, looking at those together, that was the 7th wettest on record for Arizona. It was the 8th wettest on record for New Mexico. Now with September, we started to kind of tamp down a little bit. It started to transition. So we call these transition seasons. We started to see some of the tropical systems come in, and we weren't seeing all of that precipitation. So September kind of tampered down a little bit, but it was still a good month. October has been wonderful, and we really are appreciative of what we've been receiving. I've just I'm about to put out a tweet for Arizona precipitation for October 1 through yesterday, and we are at, upwards of 300% of average precipitation. There are places in the state, kind of in Cochise County, which is down in the southwest corner, the southeast corner, and it's received over 2 inches of precipitation just within the last 2 weeks. So we're seeing some really good things. Now, looking at kind of the before and the after, I was watching New Mexico through the summer. I saw that it had that really large exceptional drought kind of taking over the state. 2 years ago, Arizona looked like that. So it's kind of a back and forth that we've been seeing here between our 2 states. And that exceptional drought was fairly quickly mitigated by that tremendous amount of precipitation. And so when we're looking at kind of the current drought, here we are looking at it now, we still have some extreme drought in New Mexico, a little bit, and there's a tiny bit of exceptional that's kind of dealing with what's going on in Texas and Oklahoma. But you can see in Colorado, that white area in the middle of Colorado, which is, we're looking at the Rockies, you're absolutely seeing no drought. And in fact, even the yellow abnormally dry is considered areas of no drought, without drought. And so really only when you start to get to the moderate, the severe, the extreme, and the exceptional is that considered to be drought. And so it was an amazing summer for our areas, and ever so grateful for all of that precipitation. There was even some precipitation that made its way into Lake Mead. Now, it's really rare for summer precipitation to flow into the river systems and get into the reservoirs. But Lake Mead actually increased by about 4% from all of the precipitation this summer. So it's highly unusual, but very, very welcome. And so that was something to behold. For the water year, when we're looking at water years, we're writing our end of year reports right now, particularly for Arizona. Arizona ended up below average for our water year. So that's October 1st through September 30th. It's a way of accounting for the water that we're dealing with here. We are still below average. If we look at the water years, if I go back 29 years and I start with water year 1994, from that time to now, Arizona has really only had 9 wet years, 9 wet water years. We've had 20 that have been below average. So we're still dealing with this long-term entrenched drought. So I did want to show you what the expectation is, what the outlook is for winter. So we're still expecting, which is, it's shocking to me to still see that we're for October, for the month, we're still expecting to see precipitation. And you can see it's got the bullseye right in the 4 regions area. So I'm hopeful that that pans out. This was just released a couple of weeks ago, and it's valid for the month of October. And of course, for Arizona, we've already had a really, really wet October. So if we don't get any more rain, it still counts. We still will have an exceptional amount of precipitation. When we're looking at temperatures, the temperatures continue to be above average. Why does that matter? When we're looking at temperatures, warmer atmospheres make the atmosphere more thirsty. It increases what we call evapotranspiration. And so that pulls more moisture out of the soil. And so it can dry the soil. So having warmer temperatures makes a thirstier atmosphere, which means even if you're getting precipitation, you can still be losing that water. And so now what we're looking at here is what to expect in the winter. So we're calling this the triple dip La Nina. And I'm sure you're familiar with La Nina in that statistically, that tends to keep storms away from the southern tier. That's us. It tends to push the storms higher, more northern, which is not a bad thing. So when we're looking at getting our water in the higher latitudes, the higher elevation in the winter, if it's in the form of snow, that's a great thing for our river systems, and that's a great thing for the Colorado River. So we do want as much winter snowpack as we possibly can. And so if that happens, that would be great. But for a La Nina, what tends to happen is California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, you can see all of the areas that are in brown below on our seasonal precipitation outlook map tend not to get that winter precipitation. So last year, we had a really strong December. Everybody had a great December, and then it just started petering out. So October and November last year were dry. December was wet. January, nah, not so much. And then it started drying out. So we'll see what we deal with this winter. And then of course, with our drought, the drought outlook that we're expecting, when we're looking at drought persisting, that's in brown. We don't want to see the yellow. That means the development likely, and we are seeing that in Colorado. So all of that area of white with no drought coming back into Colorado is the expectation. If we can get winter precipitation, then that won't be the case, but it's not the expectation. You can see in our outlook, they're not expecting much winter precipitation, which is a shame. So as we've seen, we had a very active monsoon season. We're dealing with a lot of precipitation still, which is excellent and helpful, but it still doesn't take away those long-term drought trends, those long-term deficits that we've been experiencing, and what may be happening in our surface rivers. That's what we're needing to pay attention to. So essentially, that's a little bit of what we experienced this summer into September, October, and what questions can I answer for everyone?
Hey, Erin, you got a question in the chat box. Let's see.
Okay.
From Mel Cody. So his question was, how far out can NOAA forecast the weather conditions and still be fairly reliable? Wondering if we can expect similar precipitation for the next year.
Oh, that's an excellent question, Cody. Or I'm sorry, Mel. Excuse me. Um, so with NOAA, what they do is they look at a variety of factors to try and see if things are gonna pop up. Um, when we were looking at the long-term forecast or the outlook for the monsoon, I was not believing it. So it's a challenge to try and get that long-term outlook to verify to be what we expect. Um, we statistically say that, you know, when we have a La Nina, it tends to be drier, but I can point you to La Nina years where it was much, much wetter. So it's just giving us an idea. It's something to maybe help plan for, but it's still, we still have to wait to see if it verifies. So next year's precipitation, you know, it's beyond me as to what we can expect for next summer. I couldn't even I couldn't put a quarter down. I could not even tell you. There are some things that we look at as things get closer, but it's a challenge, and it's a challenge for us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the question.
Thanks, Mel, for that question. If anybody wants to unmute yourself, please do so. Or you can insert your question in the chat box.
I have a question for folks. I'm really interested if you have a sense of your soil moisture conditions and or those kinds of conditions, vegetation, forestry kinds of things.
As far as you mean like our soil type of,
Or just in your wherever your areas are, does the soil moisture seem fairly good, fairly normal, the amount of water in the soil? Does it seem drier than normal? Does it seem wetter than normal?
well, past couple days now, I mean, the monsoon did us pretty good here in the area. So I would say that it did a lot good to the soil, especially for the grass that's growing right now. Before that, I mean, grass would kind of crinkle on your hand, and it really it was lacking moisture and rain,
Yeah.
and but now it's a lot better. It's a lot
Okay.
better.
Are you seeing a lot of grasses grow?
I should say so. I mean, like a few inches, yeah, few
Okay.
inches in areas where it mainly like rainwater like hits a lot. But there's parts here and there that has patches.
Yes.
So it will get to areas where it mainly rains a lot, and then you'll see like a lot more growth in the grass. But in areas where it kind of touches base a little bit, you'll see a couple inches from them growing every now and then. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah. I mean, Window Rock has 2 inches in the last 2 weeks, which is just amazing to even consider.
right, I know. They receiving a lot of rain too. We were out there September and it was pretty green.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's
We
nice.
have a raised hand. I'm sorry, Kelly. Mel.
Yeah, I saw his hand. Mel, you want to mute yourself?
Okay, I thank you. Great conversation here, really good information there. I do go on NOAA from time to time, but this helps me to navigate it just a little better.
Yeah.
But I'm heavily involved nowadays, and Helena knows this, and I think Jesse does. But I do consult as a conservation planning instructor, and we do training sessions quite often. And in doing those, we auger holes in the soil and
Yeah.
we analyze it for the participants, and we look at all the soil horizons,
Yeah.
and we look at the root structure, and we looked at certain elements in the soil that these participants need to be looking at. So I'm a full-time rancher, but just self-educated in conservation and then consulting and collaborating with folks. I was able to get a base of good knowledge, and now I do this on my own range too, because I have requirements for under USDA for some of the projects that I completed for conservation practices. But your question is directly is what's the soil moisture like? So with the recent precipitation of the monsoons, I mean, you could imagine that the soil moisture is probably through the roof in some areas, but for the most part, it's way above average. And that's what I notice when I do auger into the soil and I do analyze it. And as a result, obviously, there's quite a bit of forage out there, especially in my area. And I think that's pretty much widespread across Navajo with the forage. And I mean, it's just overwhelming and what the growth is out there, and we're still
Yeah.
enjoying it. We're still enjoying it. So it's a good thing. But that kind of takes me back to my first question is, if I look at NOAA, I mean, there's certain predictions, it's weather. So, I mean, it's all prediction, but I know technology is getting better and better. And, can we rely on it further out
Yeah.
than like the old way under the farmer's almanac,
Joe.
So, not trying to date myself, but I probably just did. But anyway, but there's a lot of resources out there I use, but I'm also very interested in new innovative ways and been attending a lot of trainings and conferences, and Helena knows that, and she's given me a lot of good information, and also about better monitoring, using rain gauges, etc. So
Yeah.
but very intriguing, and but it's really good to know that the moisture out there is much more moist than it has been in the past. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
I was going to say, Mel, what soil types are you dealing with? Are they clayey? What do you have?
In my area, sandy loam.
Sandy loam. All right. Very good.
Then some other trainings that we did, maybe New Mexico, like Zuni, that area. You're looking at clay loam.
Yeah. Okay.
Upland. That's primarily on Navajo. It's primarily sandy upland loam at the most. A lot of sandy loam, and not a whole lot of clay. Other this, sporadic. But for the most part, just rangelands that produce perennial grasses that are sandy loam inhibitive. Yeah.
Thank you. I think there was another question from someone.
Thanks,
Hi,
Mel.
this is Marge Lantana. You do have a very good presentation there, and I totally agree with your comment that we are in an excellent condition. And your question regarding the moisture out here, I myself have been utilizing a rain gauge as well, and accumulative, we probably got like maybe 6 inches rain in New Mexico, and we have a very good moisture, and we probably have like maybe a foot native grass that's the galeti and blue grama, and sacotones are very tall as well, and all our ponds are full. And as a producer, we want to continue to pray for this type of moisture every year, and hopefully we have a good outcome towards the summer. And we're expecting some snow pretty soon, and we had like probably maybe almost an inch and a half of rain this past couple days. So we're getting it.
Amazing.
And thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for your comments. I appreciate hearing about your area.
Thank you, Marge. If there are any more questions, feel free to unmute yourself, or better yet, you can insert your question in the chat box. If there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and proceed on with our ending announcements.
I got one little quick question. Is this going to be a continuing series, a monthly thing or periodic?
Unfortunately, no. We did have a drought monitoring webinar series that are recorded. If you want to head over to our website, it would have all of our PowerPoints and our previous PowerPoints and our presentations of there's 5 series. Yeah, 5 series within our drought monitoring series. And they're all posted on under our YouTube page, which is Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project. I hope that helps.
So under the Drought Learning Network, we will continue this on a quarterly basis, and we'll be partnering with some of the pueblos from New Mexico, and we'll be doing a seasonal outlook for both Arizona and New Mexico.
Okay, thank you, Helena and Jesse. I mean, if there's anything that you think I can assist you in, otherwise, you know, I'm always available for that. But I appreciate this right here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Well, if there are no further questions, we just
We
want
have Richard who has his
sorry.
hand
All
raised.
right,
Hi
go
guys,
ahead.
this is Bud, aka Bud. Aaron, I just wanted to let you know I live in a little bit different situation. I live up at about 7,800 feet, right at the edge of the Cibola National Forest, on the very southern end of McKinley County, and I am blown away. I grew up in the area, about how much rain we've gotten up there, and the soil is, you can squeeze it out of the soil up there. And it's kind of it's a mixture. On my property alone, you probably have all 3 of the ones you just mentioned as far as soil types goes. A lot of decomposed granite. There's springs that I didn't even know we had coming out. Now you ask about growth, grass growth and stuff. Unfortunately, yesterday or on Thursday of last week on my way to work, it was already down to 23 degrees. So everything was already starting to go dormant. So I couldn't tell you what this last push in the last week we've had has affected that kind of growth rate and stuff. But all I do know is that it is very wet, very wet.
Well, we like to see that, that's for sure. And we're just wanting it to stay.
And if it's up there, it's going to run downhill eventually. So that's a good thing.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Anyway.
Grateful for that. Thank you.
Hey, Aaron, you have a question in the chat box. Helena did ask, what soil moisture maps do you refer to?
Oh, I don't know if I've got a link. I can absolutely get a link though and get it for you. Should I just send it to you, Helena, or would that work?
Sure, and then we can share it with the participants here as well.
Right. Arizona, what we deal with are very clayey kinds of soils. And it makes sense. I mean, when you get up on the plateau, you're going to get the sandy kinds of conditions when you get, based on how it was built. But down here in the central and southern, it's clayey, and that gives us all of the flash floods and those kinds of things that we experience in the summer.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Aaron. We'll look forward to that link and sharing it in our newsletters this month. Is there any questions? Ryan, you got your hand raised there?
Yes, hi, this is Ryan Bart. And so Richard mentioned that grasses were growing and the temperature is getting cooler. I noticed on the Navajo Nation also that we recently with the rains have been getting a bunch of new grasses. But I wonder how long it would take for them to mature for their seeds to be viable next year. Like if it gets too cold fast right now while they're still trying to mature.
Is that for me? I'm not sure.
Sure.
Oh, well, actually, I know I wouldn't be able to gauge what would happen with vegetation necessarily. Is there somebody else who might be able to address that?
Ryan, I worked a lot in seed collection and seed use of native seed in the past. And you're right, it very well might cease the maturation of the seed. But if you're planning on collecting it and using it for next year, you can probably, before you get the hard freezes, you could probably go ahead and collect it. And it would after ripen once you've pulled it off the plant itself. In most species, I can't say for individual species, but in my experience, has happened. So I don't know if that helps you at all.
I just put a link in the chat for the NRCS USDA soil types, the soil orders map that I normally utilize. So I think you'll be able to zoom in and zoom out in another portion of NRCS, but that's where I tend to get my soil survey information from.
Thank
This
you,
is
Erin.
Mel. I do the same thing. Another site is Edit, which is NRCS as well.
Okay, thank you, Mel, for that comment. And you said it's Edit? Is that under the NRCS website too?
That's the acronym. And I want to say it's like Ecosystems Dynamic Interpretive Tool, if I remember right. But if you go NRCS and just type in Edit, it's primarily soil and ecological site descriptions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mel. Appreciate that. And thank you, Erin, for that link you provided. For those of you that want to look into soil maps under the NRCS link that was provided by Erin is in the chat box. But thank you all for all of your questions. So I hope that this presentation helped you all, and just to let you know that we have released a poll. So if you guys would kindly enough take a minute out of your time to fill out our poll survey, we would really appreciate it. Just gives us an understanding of how this presentation helped you, and if there are any other recommended presentations that you want to see from us. We do have additional comment section for you guys to list what you guys want us to view more on. So if you would kindly enough fill that out, we would really appreciate it. But we'll go ahead and close out. I just want to thank you, Erin, for this great presentation. We'll go ahead and conclude this evening's presentation. Thank you again. And thank you everyone for coming on this evening, and we really appreciate it. So we'll go ahead and move forward with our announcements. Okay. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Just want to let you guys know that we have a webinar next week featuring cattle co-op. So presenter rancher Stuart Romero is going to do a presentation for us on the 26th on Wednesday, starting at 5:30 p.m. through 6:30 p.m. And mostly with all our webinars, you would have to register. So if you would go to our website, nsa.nmsu.edu. It will be under our upcoming events, and you just go ahead and register from there. And it will notify you an hour before the presentation starts, just to let you guys know that we have a webinar next week. But other than that, this presentation will be recorded. It will be linked to our Facebook page. And we do have a YouTube channel where all of our webinars go towards. We do have a monthly newsletter that we sent out every month with upcoming events, USDA programs, and much more. So do visit us on our website. Our website is posted right there. If you want to get in touch with Jesse or I, our emails are right there as well. But we'll go ahead and end our presentation right now. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening, and hope you guys all have a good evening. And we'll stop the recording. The Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project is a New Mexico cooperative extension initiative delivered in collaboration with two of our partners. One of them is the Nate College Land Grant Office, and the other project partner we have is COPE, which stands for Community Outreach and Patient Empowerment. Our project is funded by the USDA Outreach and Assistance for Socially Disadvantaged Farmers and Ranchers and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers Program. So the goals of the NSA projects are to improve the operations, profitability, and sustainability of our Navajo ranchers and farmers and veteran farmers and ranchers. So we always encourage increasing our native producers' knowledge and accessible available programs and technical assistance provided by the USDA programs, which are NRCS, FSA, RD, and RMA, and other programs that are alike. And we also encourage the increase of local production and consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables and healthy foods by Navajo families and individuals through our gardening programs. And that kind of concludes everything of our project. But our team does include our project director, who is Dr. Michael Patrick, and our field coordinator, Jesse Jim, and myself. So we invite you all to visit our NSA website at nsa.nmsu.edu. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Helena to introduce her project.